if law were taken to be an artifact kind, as Brian Leiter claims. In order to show that this artifact approach to law is theoretically attractive, it is necessary to point out at least some of its potential contributions to the analysis of the concept of law. For this purpose, the artifact approach is presented as an alternative to the prevailing, albeit inadequate, hermeneutic definitional approach. It is widely believed that the object of inquiry of contemporary analytical legal theory is the concept of law. The nature of this concept is commonly described as hermeneutic, which presupposes the following two things. First, that its function is hermeneutic, i.e., that it figures in how humans make themselves and their practices intelligible to themselves. Second, that this hermeneutic function fixes the concept's extension. The extension of a hermeneutic concept is thus determined in relation to what we understand the concept to be, to how we employ the concept or the term by which we refer to the concept, and to how we make sense of the concept in order to make better sense of ourselves and our practices. The methodology of modest conceptual analysis, whereby the extension of a concept is fixed by its usage, is used as the most appropriate means of determining the extension of a hermeneutic concept. This extension is commonly seen as a set of necessary and sufficient conditions of the proper application of the analyzed concept. Such an approach is therefore called the definitional account of the concept of law. And finally, definitional accounts, as well as non-definitional accounts like prototype or exemplar theories of law, share the concept monism view, i.e. the view that there can only be one proper concept of law. The objections to this widespread view refer to all of its three claims: the hermeneutic nature claim, the decompositional claim, and the concept monism claim. However plausible, the hermeneutic concept of law does not seem to encompass at least two important aspects. First, it leaves out the competent observer's perspective. As Raz, the most prominent supporter of the hermeneutic approach to legal theory, sometimes points out, one should not always make too much of participant perception. Competent observers characterize the activities of legal officials differently. Sometimes there are conventions of presentation, which most, if not all, competent observers know to be misleading, and where clear analysis conflicts with participant perceptions or presentation. Sometimes it is the latter that must give way. Second, the hermeneutic concept of law is silent as to what the law author's intentions are, especially as to the intended properties and functions of law. This, as is argued in the paper, may be overcome by analyzing the concept of law as an artifact concept. As regards the decompositional claim, one should take into account empirical research in cognitive psychology over the last 30 years. Psychologists have been pushed to abandon the view that we represent concepts with simple sets of necessary and sufficient conditions. The data seem to show that, except for some mathematical and geometrical concepts, it is not possible to use simple sets of conditions to capture the intuitive judgments people make regarding what falls under a given concept. And finally, given the proliferation of forms of transnational regulation, often claiming authority as law, the assumed law concept monism, which as a rule encompasses only state law, seems inadequate as well. Therefore, the following sections will consider whether it will be more fruitful to explain law as a human artifact, and thus also the concept of law as an artifact concept, determined not only on the basis of how its adversaries understand it, but also on the basis of the intentions of lawmakers. The artifact concept of law will be analyzed through Bloom's intentional historical account of our understanding of artifact concepts. However, prior to this, it is necessary to determine the ontological status of entities we tend to name law. For this purpose, I will employ Searle's theory of social and institutional reality and claim that law, or more precisely legal systems, are entities belonging to that kind of reality. I will use the terms law and legal system interchangeably throughout the paper, since I take law to necessarily be a system of rules and never just a set of separate standards without any identifying or common mark. Finally, if taking into account the fact that the concept monism of today has failed to produce any adequate results, one ought to accept that the concept of law should be analyzed as an artifact concept. The possibility of accepting concept pluralism with respect to the concept of law should be considered. According to Searle's theory of social ontology, three devices, tools, are needed to analyze this ontology. The first is collective intentionality. All genuinely social behavior contains collective intentionality on the part of participants. The second is the assignment of function. People have the capacity to assign functions to objects that do not have these functions independently of the assignment. The third is status functions. This is a special kind of assignment of function where the object or person to whom the function is assigned cannot perform the function just in virtue of its physical structure, but rather can perform the function only in virtue of the fact that there is a collective assignment of a certain status, and the object or person performs its function only in virtue of collective acceptance by the community that the object or person has the requisite status. This assignment usually takes the form x counts as y, or more characteristically, x counts as y in context C. In all of these cases, x identifies certain features of an object or person or state of affairs, and y term assigns a special status function, to that person or object or state of affairs, which status carries a certain deontology, i.e. certain deontic powers. Deontic powers come in the form of rights, claims, duties, obligation, and liabilities. They represent the structures of power relationships, which power relationships function by creating reasons for action that are independent of one's wishes. Recognizing something as a duty, obligation, or claim means recognizing that you have a reason to do something that is independent from your personal preferences at any given moment. Therefore, people assign a status to a certain object, and then they accept and recognize this status as one which gives them reasons for action independent of their own wishes. So the basic operator for making powers in society for Searle is we accept S has power, as does A. When the procedure or practice of counting x as y becomes regularized, it becomes a rule. And rules of the form x counts as y in context C are then constitutive of institutional structures. As regards the ontological status of law, Searle's theory could be employed in the following way. Law is everything to what collective intentionality attributes the status function law. X counts as law, legal system, in context C. From such a status function, being law, certain types of power relationships arise. Deontic powers such as rights, duties, obligations, claims, liabilities are created. The basic deontic power is the obligation of norm addressees to obey law. The basic operator for the making of law's powers is we accept law has power, law does A. The relationship between the formula x counts as law in context C and we accept law has power, law does A manifests itself not only in our accepting that law has power, but also that law has this power on the basis of its institutional status. Once we recognize and accept that x counts as law, legal system, we also accept that x has powers to do certain things, e.g. to claim authority and authoritatively bind its addressees. In this case, we accept that law, legal system, has power, law does A, since law equates x, and since we have already accepted that x counts as law, and that law is a status function which carries with herself some recognized deontic powers. When the procedure or practice of recognizing and counting x as law, legal system, becomes regularized, it becomes a rule. And the rule of the form x counts as law, legal system, in C, is then constitutive of the institutional structure called law or legal system. In the case of law, this rule might be seen as the rule of recognition. According to Hart, I'm quoting, the rule of recognition exists as a complex but normally concordant practice of the courts, officials, and private persons in identifying the law by reference to certain criteria. Its existence is a matter of fact. If doubts arise as to what the primary rules, e.g. rules of obligation, are, or as to the precise scope of some given rule, the rule of recognition provides the procedure for settling this doubt, either by reference to an authoritative text or to an official whose declarations on this point are authoritative. A person who seriously asserts the validity of some given rule of law, say a particular statute, himself makes use of the rule of recognition which he accepts as appropriate for identifying the law. Secondly, it is the case that this rule of recognition, in terms of which he assesses the validity of a particular statute, is not only accepted by him, but is the rule of recognition actually accepted and employed in the general operation of the system? If the truth of this presupposition were doubted, it could be established by reference to actual practice, to the way in which courts identify what is to count as law, and to the general acceptance of or acquiescence in these identifications. Since I have identified law, legal system, as an entity in institutional reality, and since these entities are artifact kinds as opposed to natural kinds, it is now necessary for analytical legal theory to inquire into what is needed for expounding the theory of the artifact concept of law. I will employ for this purpose Bloom's historical intentional account of our understanding of artifact concepts. The reasons for employing Bloom's theory are twofold. First, it claims superiority to existing competitors, those which analyze artifact concepts in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions, family resemblances, characteristic functions, or prototypes. Second, it claims to be a theory which covers artifacts of all kinds. However, it remains to be seen whether Bloom's theory, apart from being applicable to ordinary artifacts such as chairs, clocks, and tables, covers more complex artifacts as well, i.e. institutional artifacts such as law or legal system. According to Bloom's theory, we construe the extension of artifact kind X to be those entities that have been successfully created with the intention that they belong to the same kind as current and previous X's. Bloom proposes that for any artifact kind X, to be an X is to be an object successfully created with the intent that it be an X, where what it is to be an X at a given time is informed inescapably by past instances of X. Bloom's insight is thus that all artifact concepts have an essential historical component, so that the past deployment of such concepts ineluctably enters into their present and future deployment through the backward directed intentions that the makers of such artifacts must of necessity possess. The application of his theory to the artifact concept of law, legal system, would mean the following. We construe the extension of artifact kind legal system to be those entities that have been successfully created with the intention that they belong to the same kind as current and previous legal systems, or equivalently, with the intention that they be legal systems. The caveat successfully expresses the constraint that entities must turn out as they were intended to turn out. Therefore, instantiations of legal systems would be those entities successfully created with the intention that they be instantiations of legal systems. According to Bloom's theory, we view legal systems as those entities that would be viewed by their creators as successful products of the intention to create legal systems. Even without the necessary and sufficient features, we do possess knowledge about legal systems, what they typically look like, and how they are typically used. And we can use this knowledge, along with our notions about the relationship between intention and product, to infer whether a novel entity was intended to be a legal system, just as we can use the same sort of knowledge to infer whether something was intended to be a chair, or a picture of a dog, or a work of art. The intentional historical hypothesis posits that a person will assume that legal systems are those entities created with the intention to belong to the same kind as the original object or objects she was exposed to. She might note, for instance, that the entities that have been described as legal systems tend to share certain features: normativity, hierarchy of norms, claim to be a legitimate authority, institutional character, and so on and so forth, and might observe that their shared underlying function is the authoritative guidance of human behavior. If she is then exposed to a novel object with the same features and the same function, she will assume that this too is a legal system, because this sameness of features and function is an excellent cue that it was intentionally created to be a member of the same kind. This proposal is different from the position that artifact concepts are individuated solely in terms of the functions that the objects were intended to fulfill, such as guiding behavior. The intended function cannot be criterial, since we are capable of distinguishing legal systems from members of other artifact kinds that are also made to guide behavior, such as moral systems, custom, or rules of the game. To tell whether something was created with the intention that it fall into the class of legal systems and not to the class of moral systems, custom, or rules of the game, then one must attend to other properties of the object that reflect the creator's intention, such as its important features. We infer that a novel entity has been successfully created with the intention to be a member of artifact kind legal system if its appearance and potential use are best explained as resulting from the intention to create a member of artifact kind legal system. Our intuitions as to which features of an object are relevant when determining artifact kind membership are based on our inferences as to which features exist as the result of the intention to construct a member of a specific artifact kind. In general, then, it is possible that our intuitions as to how and why artifacts are created can provide a framework with which to explain why some properties of artifacts are relevant for categorization and some are not. Thus, it is also possible that our intuitions regarding the ways of and reasons for the making of legal systems might provide us with a framework with which we could explain why some features of legal systems are and others are not relevant for categorization. And this is where the historical and intentional element of Bloom's theory is best manifested. On the other hand, under the prototype theories, something is judged to be a member of a kind to the extent it possesses features that typical members of that kind possess. It is judged to be less of a member to the extent that it lacks these features or has different ones. According to such theories, something would also be judged to be a member of the kind called legal systems to the extent it possesses features that typical members of that kind possess. And it would be judged to be less of a member to the extent that it lacks these features or has different ones. A typical member under the prototype theory of law would most probably be the state legal system, as it is the central and most unambiguous example. However, by confining ourselves to just one member of the kind legal system, i.e. state legal system or municipal legal system, we would miss a whole set of other possible members which could, it is at least to be assumed, represent adequate instantiations of legal systems and be worthy of our theoretical attention. Second, if we start our inquiry into other possible members of the kind legal system by following a list of features which is based on just the clearest member of the kind, we could well come up against the get-here problem and be prompted to revise our list each time this occurs. And it is most often the case when analyzing, for example, the international legal system on the basis of features of municipal legal systems that we are tempted to conclude either that the international legal system is not a legal system, which today sounds implausible, but not for Marmer, or that legal system does not have the features we attributed to it at the beginning of our inquiry. Contrary to the prototype theories, there is evidence that people are willing to accept an atypical object as a member of a kind to the extent that they can imagine a plausible scenario as to how someone could successfully build it with the intention that it be a member of that kind. One case of this concerns our intuitions about historical continuity. Atypical members are assumed to belong to an artifact kind by virtue of our appreciation that they form a natural continuity with previous instances of that kind. The prototype theory entails that people should judge a novel entity to be a legal system to the extent that it is similar to known legal systems, where similarity is captured in terms of some list of features. On the other hand, the intentional historical account will appeal to other factors as well, such as one's intuitions as to what would constitute an improvement on current legal systems, in terms of advanced structure, enhanced function, or just better style. For example, we might take coercion to be an important feature of law. According to folk intuitions, perhaps even the essential. However, it is possible that some new sanctionless system of norms emerges and that we still take it to be a member of the kind legal system on the basis of the historical intentional theory of artifact concepts. Finally, the historical intentional theory provides an answer to the question when some entity created with the intention to be a member of artifact kind X ceases to be a member of that artifact kind. For Bloom, we infer that a novel entity has been successfully created with the intention to be a member of artifact kind X and thus is a member of artifact kind X if its current appearance and potential use are best explained as resulting from the intention to create a member of artifact kind X. So, when might we say that an entity created with the intention to be a member of artifact kind legal system ceases to be a legal system? According to the historical intentional theory of legal systems, a legal system ceases to be a legal system in the moment in which its appearance, e.g. its non-functioning institutions, and its potential use, e.g. when the fulfillment of claims deriving from legal norms falls below the minimum, when a legal system stops guiding the behavior of its addressees, can no more be best explained as resulting from the intention to create a member of artifact-kind legal system. And to conclude, the intention of this paper, as I said, was only to outline some preliminary thoughts on how the concept of law might be analyzed if law were taken to be an artifact kind, as Brian Leiter claims. Furthermore, in order to make this artifact approach to law theoretically appealing, it was necessary to point out at least some of its potential contributions to the analysis of the concept of law. For this purpose, it was put forward as an alternative to the prevailing, albeit inadequate, hermeneutic definitional approach. The preliminary results might briefly be stated as follows. The ontological identification of law as an entity in institutional reality and the artifact historical intentional approach to the concept of law seems to overcome some of the deficiencies of the hermeneutic definitional approach. First, the artifact concept of law, since it starts from the fact that law is a human creation, commits us to include in our theories of law the law creator's intentions and opens up room for the competent observer's perspective on law or legal system. Second, since essentialist theories are not usually extended to artifacts, it commits us only to the revealing of those features of law, legal system, that are important, and important for the reason that they were intended as such by the law creator. And after proposing an alternative to the hermeneutic and decompositional claims, I still have to offer a justification for endorsing law concept pluralism as opposed to the prevailing law concept monism, but this, however, will be tackled in another paper. Thank you for your attention.
Questions?
And comments?
Yeah, I am sympathetic with your idea of law as an artifact, and I think that in general legal positivists should be sympathetic with that. Natural law